New developments tonight in the search for 84-year-old Nancy Guthrie, more than 4 months after she disappeared from her Tucson home. Volunteers in Mexico say they received a tip about where her remains could be. 12 News reporter Maria Stobbs is here with the latest. Maria?
Mark, that's right. This search group regularly looks for missing people, and they've helped find the remains of dozens of people in the Nogales area. But this is the first time they've received a tip that specifically mentioned Nancy Guthrie.
One of the more unusual developments in the Nancy Guthrie investigation did not come from a witness interview, a court filing, or a public statement. It reportedly came from an anonymous tip. According to multiple reports circulating around the case, investigators were informed that Nancy's remains might be located somewhere in Mexico. The claim immediately attracted attention because it appeared to introduce an entirely new geographic dimension to an investigation that had already generated months of questions, theories, and speculation. At first glance, an anonymous tip is not unusual in a major missing person case. Investigators routinely receive information from people who do not wish to identify themselves. Some tips lead nowhere. Others help establish timelines, locate evidence, or identify potential witnesses. The challenge is determining which information deserves serious attention and which information does not withstand scrutiny. Detail matters because the public often learns about a tip long before investigators reveal whether it has any credibility. According to publicly discussed information, the report concerning Mexico quickly became a subject of debate. Some observers viewed it as potentially significant. Others questioned whether the information had any factual basis at all. Authorities have not publicly confirmed many of the details surrounding the claim, which means much of the discussion has centered on what is known, is not known, and what investigators may be attempting to verify. To understand why the reported tip attracted so much attention, it helps to look at the broader timeline. Nancy Guthrie's disappearance has generated numerous questions since the beginning of the investigation. Family members, friends, investigators, and members of the public have all attempted to understand what may have happened. Over time, various statements, reports, and theories emerged. Some were supported by evidence. Others appeared to be based largely on speculation. Consider this. When a case remains unresolved for an extended period, investigators often continue reviewing old information while simultaneously evaluating new leads. Tip does not have to be proven true in order to be examined. In many cases, authorities are obligated to determine whether a lead can be verified before dismissing it. Appears to be one reason the Mexico claim became noteworthy. If investigators received information identifying a specific location, a specific individual, or a specific reason for believing Nancy may be connected to an area in Mexico, they would likely need to assess that information against existing evidence. That process could include examining travel records, communication records, financial activity, witness statements, and previously collected investigative material. Publicly available information, however, does not clearly establish what evidence, if any, accompanied the reported tip. Viewed in isolation, the detail appears ordinary. Anonymous tips arrive regularly in high-profile cases, but placed beside the timeline becomes more significant because of the questions it creates. Why Mexico? What information allegedly led someone to that conclusion? And perhaps most importantly, what did the person providing the tip claim to know? Those questions remain difficult to answer because authorities have released very little information regarding the matter. Then something happened. As discussion of the reported tip spread, observers began comparing it against information already known about the case. Some attempted to identify possible connections. Others searched for travel histories, family links, business relationships, any detail that might explain why Mexico was suddenly being mentioned. The results were mixed. Some theories suggested possible connections that could explain the claim. Other theories appeared far more speculative. Authorities have not publicly endorsed many of those ideas, which makes it important to separate documented information from assumptions made online. Distinction matters because missing person investigations often become surrounded by narratives that expand faster than the evidence itself. investigators generally work in the opposite direction. They begin with evidence and then determine which theories fit the facts. Members of the public sometimes begin with a theory and then search for facts that appear to support it. Those are very different approaches, which raises another question. If the anonymous tip contained information that investigators considered potentially credible, would they be looking for next? In many cases, authorities attempt to verify details that are not publicly known. If a source provides information that only someone with direct knowledge could reasonably possess, investigators may view that differently than a vague claim lacking specifics. The exact contents of the reported tip remain unclear. Authorities have not publicly disclosed what information was allegedly provided. As a result, it is impossible to independently evaluate its credibility from publicly available information alone. But something doesn't fit. If the claim was completely unsupported, why did it generate such sustained discussion? Part of the answer may be the nature of the case itself. A disappearance remains unresolved, every new lead attracts attention. Families want answers. Communities want answers. Investigators want answers. Even a lead that ultimately proves incorrect can become significant because of the investigative work it triggers. Consider previous missing person investigations. There have been instances where authorities spent weeks or months examining information that eventually produced no evidence at all. There have also been cases where seemingly minor tips helped uncover critical facts. The difficulty is that nobody knows which category a lead belongs to until it is examined. That uncertainty appears to be exactly where this situation stands. Publicly available information indicates that questions surrounding Nancy's disappearance remain unresolved. Reports concerning the anonymous tip have added another layer of complexity. They have not eliminated the central mystery. Where is Nancy? What happened during the critical period investigators continue examining? And does the reported claim involving Mexico represent a meaningful lead, merely another theory competing for attention in an already complicated investigation? At first glance, the anonymous tip may seem like just another rumor. Yet investigators understand that significant developments sometimes emerge from unexpected sources. The challenge is determining whether a reported lead can survive the scrutiny required in a serious investigation. For now, the available information leaves an important issue unresolved. Authorities have not publicly revealed enough details for outside observers to evaluate the tip independently. Until more information becomes available, the claim remains exactly what it began as, a reported lead that has generated substantial discussion but has yet to provide clear answers. One of the difficulties investigators face in cases involving anonymous information is determining whether the source possesses genuine knowledge or simply repeating information already circulating publicly. That distinction becomes especially important when a tip introduces a location that previously had little visible connection to the investigation. In the case of the reported Mexico lead, publicly available information has not established exactly how the alleged location became part of the conversation. Investigators have not publicly explained whether the tip referenced a specific city, a specific region, or a specific property. Without those details, it becomes difficult to understand what authorities may have been attempting to verify. Detail matters because the quality of a tip often depends on its specificity. A caller who says evidence can be found in a particular location provides investigators with something concrete to examine. A caller who offers only broad claims may create more questions than answers. Authorities generally evaluate not only what information is provided, but also whether portions of that information can be independently confirmed. Now, consider this. If investigators received a tip pointing toward Mexico, they would not necessarily begin by searching internationally. The first step would likely involve determining whether any existing evidence connected Nancy, her associates, relevant individuals to the area being referenced. That process could involve reviewing travel records, passport activity, financial transactions, communication histories, and previously collected witness statements. Viewed separately, none of those records would prove anything. investigators rarely evaluate evidence in isolation. They look for patterns. They compare one piece of information against another. They attempt to determine whether multiple facts point in the same direction. That is where some observers believe the significance of the reported tip may lie. Not because the claim itself proves anything, because it potentially offers a new angle from which existing evidence can be reviewed. Then something happened. As discussion surrounding the reported lead expanded, attention returned to several aspects of the timeline that had already generated debate. Various statements made throughout the investigation were revisited. Certain details that previously appeared unrelated were once again examined through the lens of the new information. This does not mean those details suddenly became evidence supporting the Mexico claim. Rather, the introduction of a new lead encouraged people to reevaluate facts they may have previously overlooked. Investigators often do the same thing. A case file is rarely reviewed only once. Detectives routinely revisit witness interviews, timelines, and records as new information becomes available. A statement that seemed insignificant 6 months earlier can take on new meaning when compared against a newly reported lead. But something doesn't fit. Despite the attention generated by the anonymous tip, there has been little publicly available information suggesting that authorities have confirmed any direct connection between Nancy and the reported location. That absence of confirmation has fueled two competing interpretations. Possibility is that investigators examined the claim and found little supporting evidence. Another possibility is that authorities continue evaluating information that has not yet been made public. Neither conclusion can be verified from publicly available records alone. That uncertainty has become one of the defining features of the discussion. According to reports, the investigation has already involved numerous theories, claims, and interpretations offered by various observers. Some have focused on family dynamics. Others have concentrated on timelines. Some have examined financial questions. Others have explored witness statements and reported inconsistencies. The Mexico claim entered an environment where many unanswered questions already existed, which raises another question. What would investigators need to find in order for a tip like this to become genuinely significant? Answer likely involves corroboration. An anonymous claim by itself generally carries limited value, but if investigators discover records, statements, or evidence that independently support portions of that claim, its importance can increase substantially. For example, authorities often examine whether information provided by a source matches facts that were not publicly known. They may compare the claim against timelines, locations, communications, or other investigative findings. The exact methods used would depend on the nature of the information received. At first glance, that may not seem important. It helps explain why investigators rarely dismiss or accept a lead immediately. Most information exists somewhere between those two extremes, until it can be tested against available evidence. That process can take time. Some investigations, weeks pass before a lead is fully evaluated. In others, months may pass before authorities determine whether information has any investigative value. The public often sees only fragments of that process. Investigators, meanwhile, are usually examining a much larger collection of records, interviews, and evidence than outside observers ever see. Reality creates another challenge. When limited information becomes public, speculation often fills the gaps. In the Nancy Guthrie investigation, speculation has sometimes moved faster than confirmed facts. That does not mean every theory is incorrect. It simply means that theories and evidence are not the same thing. The distinction becomes particularly important when discussing anonymous sources. Anyone can make a claim. The question investigators must answer is whether the claim can withstand verification. Placed beside the timeline, however, the reported Mexico lead remains interesting for a different reason. It demonstrates that authorities may still be receiving information long after the initial stages of the investigation. Cases that remain unresolved often continue generating tips, statements, and potential leads for years. Some eventually prove valuable. Many do not. Determining the difference is one of the most difficult responsibilities investigators face. As discussions surrounding the anonymous tip continued, observers began focusing on another issue. If the source genuinely believed Nancy's remains were located in Mexico, how did that person supposedly acquire the information? Is it first-hand knowledge, second-hand information, a rumor that spread through private conversations, or something else entirely? Authorities have not publicly answered those questions. The exact details remain unclear. What is clear is that the reported tip introduced a new line of inquiry into a case already filled with unanswered questions. Claim has not resolved the mystery. It has not provided definitive proof of anything. It has encouraged investigators and observers alike to look at the timeline from a different perspective. When investigators begin looking at old evidence through a new lens, unexpected details sometimes emerge. For now, important contradiction remains unresolved. A tip significant enough to attract widespread attention has produced very little publicly confirmed information. Whether that reflects the weakness of the claim or the private nature of an active investigation remains uncertain. Investigators may have discovered while examining the reported lead is still largely unknown. Possibility investigators must always consider is that an anonymous tip reveals nothing new at all. Another possibility is that the source possesses information that has never been made public. The challenge is determining which explanation fits the evidence. As discussion surrounding the reported Mexico lead continued, attention increasingly shifted away from the claim itself and toward the circumstances surrounding it. Investigators generally understand that a tip is only as valuable as the information supporting it. A location by itself proves very little. Location supported by verifiable details is an entirely different matter. That distinction appears central to understanding where this aspect of the investigation stands today. Publicly available information has not established whether authorities uncovered evidence supporting the reported claim, nor have investigators publicly announced that the information was disproven. The result is a situation where one of the most talked about developments in the case, it remains surrounded by uncertainty. Viewed in isolation, that uncertainty may seem frustrating, but it is not unusual. Many major investigations contain leads that remain confidential for extended periods. Authorities sometimes withhold information because verification efforts are ongoing. In other cases, information is withheld because investigators do not want potential witnesses tailoring future statements around publicly released details. Now consider this. If the anonymous source provided information that investigators believed warranted further examination, authorities would likely compare that information against material already collected during the investigation. That could include witness statements, phone records, travel histories, financial activity, timelines, and other evidence that may never become public unless it is introduced in legal proceedings. The public generally sees only a fraction of that process. What makes the Mexico claim particularly unusual is that it introduced a geographic element that many observers had not previously associated with the case. As a result, discussion quickly expanded beyond the original report itself. People began searching for possible connections, possible explanations, possible reasons why such a location would even be mentioned. Some theories focused on personal relationships. Others focused on travel possibilities. Some attempted to identify indirect connections that might explain why Mexico entered the conversation at all. Something doesn't fit. Despite extensive discussion, very little publicly available evidence has emerged establishing a confirmed connection between Nancy and the reported location. That does not mean such evidence does not exist. It simply means it has not been publicly presented. Difference is important. Investigators work with evidence. The public often works with information gaps, and information gaps tend to generate speculation. Placed beside the broader timeline, however, the anonymous tip highlights something else. The case continues to generate leads long after the initial disappearance. Reality suggests there are still individuals who believe they possess relevant information, whether accurate or not. Every new lead creates additional work for investigators. Each claim must be assessed. Each statement must be compared against known facts. Each possibility must be evaluated before it can be accepted or dismissed. That process rarely happens quickly. Then something happened that often occurs in unresolved investigations. The focus shifted from the lead itself to the reliability of the source behind it. Investigators routinely ask several questions when evaluating anonymous information. How did the source obtain the information? Can any part of the claim be independently verified? Does the information align with known facts? Does it conflict with established evidence? Is the source providing specific details or broad assertions? The answers to those questions often determine whether a lead gains traction or quietly fades away. In the case of the reported Mexico tip, the public does not know how authorities answered those questions. Lack of visibility has made independent assessment nearly impossible, which raises another question. If the claim remains unresolved, should observers take away from it? Perhaps the most reasonable conclusion is also the most cautious one. The anonymous tip represents a reported lead, not a confirmed finding. Authorities have not publicly verified the claim. Authorities have not publicly disproven the claim, and because those facts remain true, the information occupies a middle ground that many people find uncomfortable. It is neither confirmed nor dismissed. Detail matters because unresolved cases are often shaped by uncertainty. Investigators frequently operate in environments where incomplete information is the norm rather than the exception. The public tends to encounter uncertainty only occasionally. Detectives encounter it every day. As a result, some of the most important developments in an investigation are not dramatic discoveries but careful evaluations of information that may or may not prove useful. At first glance, the anonymous tip may appear to be a major breakthrough. At first glance, it may also appear to be nothing more than a rumor. The reality is that publicly available information does not allow either conclusion to be reached with confidence. What remains clear is that the reported lead became significant because it redirected attention toward unanswered questions that have existed since the beginning of the investigation. Where is Nancy? What happened during the period investigators continue examining? Are there individuals who possess information they have not yet shared publicly? And does the reported Mexico claim originate from genuine knowledge, misunderstanding, or speculation? Those questions remain unresolved. For now, the evidence available to the public supports only a limited conclusion. A reported anonymous tip claimed Nancy's remains could be located in Mexico. The claim generated significant discussion. Authorities have not publicly provided enough information to confirm or reject it. Until additional verified facts emerge, the reported lead remains one piece of a much larger investigation that continues to leave important questions unanswered. If you've been following this case, let me know in the comments which piece of evidence you believe deserves the closest examination. Here at the Evidence Room, we follow the facts, examine the timeline, and track every development as investigators continue searching for answers. If you haven't already, subscribe and turn on notifications so you don't miss future investigations.